1 on Monday, Monday, October 24th. And we have an agenda. Do I have any comments on the agenda or a motion to?
I move we accept the agenda.
Excellent. Do I have a second? Excellent. Motion and a second. Are there any comments on the motion to approve the agenda? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. And we have a packet for you with the wrong cover date. Sorry, Stacy. Thank you. This one says July 11th. I'm pretty sure that's not the right one. Okay. All right. Next, we have an approval of the minutes from July 11th. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I move approval of minutes.
Excellent. Motion and a second. Any comments on the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. We now have minutes. And the next, we're moving on to discussion items. The first is an update by the Alachua County EPD on water conservation.
Good morning, everybody. Stacy Greco, Water Resources Program Manager with Alachua County Environmental Protection Department. We really need rain, so I thought I would talk about water conservation because every time I do, it pours. But yeah, I don't know. It's not in the forecast for today.
I brought my umbrella today.
I know.
So this is just going to be an update on some of our efforts, and we're in the process of updating our irrigation design code, and just starting off with an image from our aquifer awareness campaign that we're doing on social media. We've had billboards where we are trying to teach all of our residents that our drinking water comes from the aquifer. This is data that I have showed over and over again. I'm really hoping that the 2020 data is out soon. And the main goal is just to show that here in Alachua County, our largest water use is from our public supply. So that's all the water that we purchase from the various utilities in the county. So some of our neighboring counties, like Gilchrist, for example, agriculture would be the biggest use. But here it's public supply, which is largely driven by our residential use. I'm going to actually skip this because I think this graph does a better job. This is data from the UF Program for Resource Efficient Communities. Dr. Taylor over there has looked at, this is 2021 average water use on your left axis there. So that's, and it's aggregated by the year that houses were built. So what this shows you is that that orange line is the percent of new houses that have irrigation systems. So as you see, let's see if I can get, well, you see that orange line, as it increases, the water use really jumps up. So if you look at houses that were built in the 1920s, in 2021, their average water use was just a little bit over 100. If you look at houses that were built in 2020, their average water use is up at 400. So it's really showing that trend that if there's irrigation, these houses are using more water. So also from Dr. Taylor, to put this in perspective, that every time an irrigation system is turned on an average size lot with the recommended rate, it uses the same amount of water as a 15-hour shower. So I've heard teenagers take long showers and can waste a lot of water, but 15 hours is pretty excessive, and that's every time it's turned on. So that's just really showing the magnitude of it and why we focus so much on irrigation. When we are encouraging people to take 5-minute showers, but turn off that irrigation system once and all of those 5-minute showers, or it's in the wash. So limiting permanent irrigation is key. So if irrigation is installed, it will be used. It requires owner education, which is continual. We always have to remind people, and then we have turnover as people come into our community and leave. Irrigation requires maintenance. It's like a car. You can't just drive it forever and expect that it's not going to have leaks or need to be fixed. And it can contribute to fertilizer pollution. We know that irrigation is one way that fertilizer moves throughout our landscapes. So I want to put this in some regional regulatory context. So the lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee rivers we're in the process of the minimum flows and levels rulemaking. So there have been 3 DEP workshops. We have been heavily involved with all of them, and we've had provided comments. And basically, the Ichetucknee is said to be in recovery, and the Santa Fe River is in prevention. What that boils down to is there is not enough water for our existing use and for projected use and to have healthy springs and rivers. So we need to find ways to reduce our water use or increase recharge. So right now, the water management districts and the state are looking for projects and for regulatory options that will go in a prevention and recovery plan. We should get an update on their schedule. They are coming to the Santa Fe Springs Forum on November 30th. So we should get an update there. If it makes sense, if there's progress to report on, perhaps this could be a topic for your December meeting. So what are we doing in the county? So rather than just wait for this prevention and recovery plan, we're always working to conserve water with our partners at GRU and at the university. So what we're doing is we're trying to limit irrigation in new construction, and our irrigation design code is our main tool for that, and that's what I'll mostly focus on. We're also looking at some other changes to our landscaping code or Springs Aquifer Recharge Code that might help us make some better decisions when we're in the planning of a development stage. Trying to reduce existing irrigated area, our turf swap rebate program is our main way of doing that. And then we have our homeowners association code where we can help residents that are wanting to make changes and are having resistance from their homeowners associations. And then we also, a lot of people are going to want to keep those irrigation systems. So we do a lot of education to get people to reduce how they use them.
Mr. Chair, real quick on this slide. Can you, this is the second round of the turf swap program, right? Second grant cycle. Okay, can
Correct.
you just go into that a little bit more? I know it was really successful and a great opportunity for people. So how many homes do you expect to serve? And then what are the, I know that we can go online to find it, but just if people are maybe watching this, what are the criteria for being eligible for that program?
Yeah, so our turf swap program, it's a 50% rebate for people that make changes to their landscapes. And the first round of it was open to anyone that wanted to participate within Alachua County and people in the city of Gainesville. We actually evaluated the water use from that, and it saved water, but not as much as we wanted. So then in the second phase, we really limited it to high water users. So we sent postcards inviting people to participate if they were that high water user. And we're actually, that's next up for Dr. Taylor to analyze is that data. So how much are we saving there? We coupled it with tune-ups also. So I think we'll really see more savings there. We don't have very much money left on that, but we just got, we're in the process of getting additional funding from Sewanee where we'll really focus on fixing the irrigation system. So we'll do an irrigation tune-up and we'll identify leaks and zones that can be eliminated, and then people can use that money then to make those changes. So the program has shifted. If you haven't heard about it, it's because we've been really targeting those higher water users now.
Great, thank you, very helpful.
No problem. Just want to give an example. We do a lot of education, and it's something that when we talk to people about irrigation, they say, oh, we just need to do education, not regulation. And we are doing a lot of education. If you're not seeing our education, that probably means you're a lower water user, because we do tend to try to target those messages. So this is an example just of some of our social media. Spent $1,300 to reach 92,000 people, and we received 1,800 website visits from that. So pretty good return on our investment. We do
I love that middle one, by the way. That's awesome.
That one, I think we did get an award from one of the water organizations for that middle image. So we do send postcards to high water users and to irrigation violations if people are irrigating on the wrong day, and to new properties. So we're really trying to let people know, if they have an irrigation system and they're new to their home, especially new construction, that it's their responsibility to change that controller, and that, as a property owner, they have some responsibilities. And we, of course, partner with Extension, and we've had several workshops. We'll be training their new crop of master gardeners next week. Okay, so our irrigation design code, all new irrigation systems, and this is landscape irrigation, so not agriculture, go through an approval process starting in April of 2016. In 2019, that expanded into the municipalities, so including Gainesville and Hawthorne and all of the other municipalities. It requires plans to be submitted, there's fees, and then there's an inspection. So most of them are a self-inspection because the irrigation contractors are Florida Water Star accredited professionals. If not, then they pay for county staff to do an inspection, or if we've removed their self-inspection status due to a lot of failed random inspections. Before this, irrigation professionals were unregulated, so we knew that this was a bit of a baby step. You know, you can't go from 0 to 90 miles per hour overnight. So we've always seen this as a moving target that we're going to constantly have to update. So what are we finding? UF did a preliminary analysis of the water use, and they're working on a publication for that. And we're not showing as much water savings as we want, which wasn't a huge surprise because we do see that most new construction still includes irrigation, and it still maximizes that irrigated turf all the way up to what the code allows. We find that many contractors are leaving the rainfall shutoff devices inactive, so systems are irrigating even when it's raining. We did find that when staff does an inspection, that those are saving more water. And the biggest difference there is when we go out there, if that rainfall shutoff device is off, we turn it on. So I think that's where we're getting the savings. And systems aren't being reprogrammed after their 2-month establishment period. Sometimes we'll go out after a year or something and people are still watering every day. So that's a big one that we're working on. And there's maintenance issues, immediately and long term. This is a real picture of something we saw in an inspection. So this is an irrigation head under a piece of sod. So obviously there's issues. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the ideas we have. We are still in stakeholder outreach as elected officials. You are stakeholders. We have some meetings coming up, and I'll summarize all the outreach that we've done. So these are just ideas. We have not drafted the code yet. So one idea is to limit irrigation for residential lots to 1/4 of an acre. Right now you can irrigate up to a 1/2 acre. You know, this isn't gonna, we don't have a ton of these big lots, but we do have some of them, and some of these people want to irrigate the whole lot. So this will help on some of those big lots, but most of our lots are smaller. So on all those other lots, and even on those bigger ones, limit irrigation to 50% of the permeable area. So currently, you're allowed to irrigate 100%, but underneath that 1/2 acre limit, but we say that you can only do 60% in your rotors or your sprays, your traditional irrigation, and then you can have beds that have the micro irrigation. So this image shows you what we're proposing. So rather than get into these different percentages of different types of irrigation heads, let's just say 50% of the area can be irrigated, and then the other 50% has to be unirrigated. So that, I think, is the biggest change that we are considering. Also limiting the irrigable area for common areas and commercial properties, and we're still playing to see, would that be 50% also, or would that be a different percentage for those land uses? This image here is of a point source drip for landscape beds instead of the traditional drip tubing. We're finding a lot of waste in those micro irrigation beds, and those are leaking a lot. So trying to find ways that if people want to be irrigating those shrubs to have it be more efficient. Discontinue site plans and sketches if jobs are small, if it's a small lot or if it's under 4 zones. And this is a way to simplify it for the irrigation contractors. So we have other things that we're going to be asking them to do, so want to give and take. If those plans aren't really that helpful for our staff, why make them upload it? Require controllers to be placed outside. This will help when we do our inspections. If these are in a garage and a homeowner's not home, we can't see what it's programmed for. We can't see if the rainfall shutoff device is on. So this would be an easy way to get water savings right away. So this map is actually not Gainesville, but we see something similar here. This is just showing variability from a lot level, where the green are lower water users, and the red and the dark orange are higher water users. So that 1,000 gallons a day, kind of our shame on you category. And so something like this, these are probably very similar lot sizes, similar builders, irrigation installers. So the big difference being homeowners. So one thing that we've talked about, our code does currently require annual maintenance of irrigation systems, but it's not something that we enforce. So, we actually, in a recent survey, floated the idea, what if we required homeowners to do a third-party inspection? They have to hire someone to run that system. And in that survey of people that use our portal, so 125 users, and these are mostly irrigation professionals and people that are in the building community that would really benefit from a policy like this, they really rejected this idea. They felt they were opposed to it, that it was overreach, and everyone we've talked with just felt like, we're not there yet, that's, a big ask during these times. So we are considering instead doing more education. So can we, with higher water users, send a letter letting them know that, it is their responsibility to maintain their system, and just have some stronger language in our letter rather than the kind of outreach that we typically have, and we can try that and see where that gets us. And the reason I showed this is just showing that, we're looking at some ideas that might be far-reaching and then, get feedback that that's not a great idea. Other potential regulatory options, this would be an unincorporated Alachua County because wouldn't be appropriate in the design code. Potentially requiring water conservation plans for new developments with irrigation. We're going to have to update our springs and high aquifer recharge code because when we make changes to the irrigation design code, it'll no longer be consistent with that code. So while we're editing that, do we go ahead and start asking for things like estimating water use so that when we're making decisions about these new developments, we see, how much water might they be using, and outlining maintenance requirements and responsible party, and try to shift some of that burden of education to the homeowners association. It's very staff intensive, us getting out there and working with all of these citizens, and we want to continue to do that, but can the HOA help with that? If we're allowing irrigation in these new developments. And also some of the information on the true cost of irrigation. We're actually working with some partners at UF to create a fact sheet that shows, with the backflow prevention, with annual maintenance and the water use, how much does an irrigation system cost a homeowner, and can that information be presented to them so that they have a choice as to whether they want that or not? Because right now it's just standard. It just pretty much comes with all new homes. Another option is to potentially require or encourage soil amendments to reduce the need for irrigation and fertilizer. There are some studies showing that this can really save water if you have the homeowner behavior change, that they actually change the controller along with their new soils. We are still evaluating the potential of unintended consequences with this. And that would not be in the design code. This would be just unincorporated Alachua County. These are the irrigation fees. They actually just increased October 1st. They pretty much doubled, and I'm going to show it to you this way. These are the same numbers, but these red ones can all be easily avoided with a competent irrigation contractor. So for example, that very bottom one, that after the fact fee, that $200, that's if someone installs irrigation without getting it approved by us first. So that's something that's very easy to avoid, along with the reinspection fee. That's if someone fails an inspection and we have to go back out. So these were just updated October 1st. We'll see if that has any change on what we're seeing out there. So where are we? So we're in the stakeholder engagement process, and we did a survey of our irrigation portal of everyone that uses that to just kind of get ideas from them and to put some of our ideas out there to see how they reacted to them. We've had several meetings with IFAS, GRU, the water management districts, the building association. We had 2 special meetings with the builders association, landscape architects, and then several field trips that have been super helpful, boots on the ground with different stakeholders. We are going to the Environmental Protection Advisory Committee November 1st, and I'll present these ideas to them, and we're meeting with irrigation professionals on November 1st also. We've got 2 meetings with them, one in person and one online, where we'll really have some dialogue and get some more feedback from them. And then the Springs Protection Forum, November 30th, and then the goal is to draft code and then ask for permission to advertise from the county commission in January or February, barring that nothing big happens between now and then that requires us to shift our attention. This is who I am, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you. We do have one question. The lights are now popping up, so thank you for the presentation. We'll start with Commissioner Harvey Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stacy, for this. It's some really good information in here. The thing that caught my eye was the 15-hour shower equivalency. So I did some quick math. That ends up being about 2,000 gallons a month. If you are pouring 2,000, anybody watching at home, if you're pouring 2,000 gallons of water on your lawn, you're spending a lot of money. You can cut your GRU bill right away by stopping that practice. That puts money back in your pocket. 2 kilogallons, assuming that that's correct information, and I do assume it is. Yeah, that's a fair chunk of money coming out of your pocket to pour on the ground outside your house. So, thank you.
You're hired.
Thank you, Commissioner
Keep that
Wheeler.
in mind.
Morning. Stacy, you know I've been an advocate for getting rid of these things completely, the underground systems. I feel like we're tiptoeing into a solution that is taking time away from what we're trying to do in terms of solving the problem. I don't know, have you all considered the idea, or actually I'm trying to understand where the resistance is coming from. Is it homeowners? Is it homeowner associations, builders, that are holding us up here?
For not having irrigation at all?
Right. I mean, I would say having to get actual plants started for a certain amount of time and then withdrawing it temporary just to get it in there. But, I, as someone who doesn't irrigate and has lived in a place for 30 years and have not had major issues, hadn't had any issues that I recognize. So I just was wondering where that's coming from.
It's super challenging, and I think we see a big difference with new construction versus older landscapes. So, like I live on the east side. My yard is older. I actually have St. Augustine with no irrigation, and it's fine. But our construction practices have also shifted. So we have pretty much it's sand underneath that layer of sod. So it is. I do recognize that there is a challenge with getting landscapes established when you don't have those soils that have built up over years, like your older homes have. When we've been talking to the industry and we talk about unirrigated landscapes, pretty much the only landscape that gets offered as what can do well with no permanent irrigation is Bahia grass, which Bahia grass is fine, but we also do want to have diversity, right? We want to have some of our flowering plants, our butterfly plants. So it's interesting that that's the perception, but we do know, there's a lot of our, our flower-friendly landscaping that can do fine without that permanent irrigation. There's resistance to that temporary irrigation also because it's just inertia. It's just a different way of doing it. Right now, it's pretty cheap to, install your irrigation, your landscape, and then you're done. If you do a temporary irrigation, someone's gonna have to put that temporary system out, maintain it, and then move it to the next lot, which we're seeing in Central Florida, in the Orlando area. So, I am going to float that idea when we talk to the contractors that, we're almost creating this new market for temporary irrigation, as we start to try to shrink that footprint of that permanent irrigation. But it would be a different look. If we had no irrigation, I will be completely honest, those landscapes would look very differently. So I think there's resistance on different levels.
Well, thank you. I I just feel like with the state of our water being what it is, we need to move a little quicker than what we're doing and be a little less concerned about homeowners than we are about the general welfare of the whole community. So, you can put that in your notes from me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anna?
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. I hear you, Commissioner Wheeler, and I feel your pain. I think that one of the things that limits our ability to move faster as well is that a lot of the research that's being done on landscaping is being done looking at optimal plant quality. And unfortunately, optimal plant quality and environmental protection are often at odds. And so until we have a landscaping industry that is focused on environmental protection first and plant quality second, meaning we still want beautiful landscapes, we still want those plants to survive, but maybe we don't need to have the perfect St. Augustine grass. Maybe we don't need our grass to be green in the middle of winter, those sorts of things. And so I think a lot of the research that we have to base decision making on ends up being based on optimal plant quality instead of how do we protect our environment first. And I think that's a question that we need to start asking, our researchers and our partners. But I am seeing some stuff come out. I know there's an outside collaborative. It's a group that's been doing a lot of work in this area, and I know IFAS is partnering with them. Some of the folks that I think you have some of their data here have been working with landscape architects and others to try to come up with new pattern books and ideas to drive decision making toward more native plants that haven't maybe been used as much in the landscape but need much, much less, if not any irrigation except for establishment, and that I don't know what the right word is, situate the conversation that you were talking about, oh, if it's drought, it just has to be Bahia, or that it can't be beautiful and also be drought tolerant. But I wonder when it comes into the codes and into, that design piece, if you've thought at all about plant choice, either limiting plant choice or creating a palette, much like we do with our tree choices. When you cut a tree down, we have a list of trees you have to put in. If we would be able to have, if not required plants, at least the recommended and suggested plants as palettes for landscapes in our area.
Yeah, and it's super tricky because on the lot level, most people aren't getting a landscape design. They're not paying a landscape architect to design a landscape. So it's really, somewhat when they come and they're installing, okay, it's what's on the truck today, okay, we need a shrub that's this high. That would be a shift and an expense, if we did start to have them design and send it to us. I guess if we did a plant list, it's definitely something we can think about. It would be nice if the Florida Friendly Landscaping list didn't include, irrigation, because then we could just refer to that. But that's not the case right now. But
yeah, I wasn't thinking so much that they had to submit a design, but more that it would be like, these are the recommended plants to put in. So whatever design you do, like instead of putting in, I don't know, a high need shrub, you'd put in the native azalea, or you'd put in an Indian hawthorn, or, something that doesn't require a lot of irrigation instead of, the all loving St. Augustine grass, or maybe you put in St. Augustine grass, but you only temporarily irrigate it. Those sorts of things, like just sort of and using the varieties that have been bred to be more drought tolerant, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, and I wonder if we get there by, if we're only allowing 50% to be irrigated, then in a way, then that other 50%, they're going to have to make smart choices on, otherwise they're not going to do well. And maybe it will be a little trial and error at first. That.
I'll just finish by saying I think one of the things that's challenging for people that are doing this in the industry as well is that a lot of those plant choices aren't super available, right? So, you go to the nursery and it's like, there's muley grass. Okay, great. So muley grass is everywhere because that's the drought tolerant option for your landscape beds. Otherwise, it's a lot of plants that are much more traditional and require a lot more irrigation. So if we can drive demand for those plants and work with nurseries to start perpetuating those plants and growing them, then it makes it easier on the builder and the developer to access those plants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, board. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Thank you, Stacy, for the what you've shown us so far. My problem, I'm looking at the cost of all of this and how that's really going to be implemented. But also, I'm concerned about the municipalities and how is that information actually getting out to the municipalities. And it's a great concern with the cost of all of this that you all are trying to move forward with. But can you give me some idea of what are your plans and how this will really take place in the smaller areas of the county?
Sure, great questions. So this irrigation design code currently does apply countywide and in the small municipalities. And it's a good time to remind everyone that irrigation is not required. So if someone does not want to have to pay these fees, then they can do a temporary irrigation system to get something established, like Commissioner Wheeler was talking about. And typically irrigation wasn't really the norm for a long time, and especially in our municipalities. I mean, it's kind of new that we're seeing, in Newberry and High Springs now, most new construction does have irrigation, whereas I would say even when we started this in 2016, that wasn't the norm. So we're seeing that trend go out into municipalities. We do work with municipalities. We have a brochure on the code, and we did go out and we distributed that to all the municipalities with a card rack in their building departments. It might be time to go back out to Hawthorne. We've really focused on Newberry, Alachua, and High Springs, where we've been seeing a lot more of the growth, and we've worked with some of their staff and city of Gainesville, to get a note on approvals that reminds people of the code so that they are making sure that they do follow it. And we're happy to come talk with any programs in the municipalities. We have done some outreach stuff with Newberry before, and happy to work with anyone, especially if you're starting to see more irrigation come in those communities.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further
Wait,
Yeah,
just
please.
one more quick question. I'm sorry, I pushed the wrong button.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
One more quick question, Stacy. Are we working with IFAS at all on any of these? Are they in tune with what we're trying to do in terms of leading the way in water protections here?
Yeah, so IFAS is big. There's lots of different groups within IFAS, and we definitely have been working with the Program for Resource Efficient Community. We've had several meetings with the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. We've got a couple more scheduled there. So we've been working with various representatives from IFAS. And, I will mention Commissioner Prizia mentioned it. We did do a literature review of the IFAS urban landscaping recommendations through the lens of protecting our water resources rather than optimal plant health. It's a very interesting paper. We just got it in October. So we will be actually presenting that at the next Santa Fe Springs Forum and at some upcoming conferences. We hope to share that to really try to help push some of the research in a direction that really focuses. Like, for example, this bottom slide here, this is some IFAS research that partnered with the Nature Conservancy looking at yards with no irrigation and showing that those homes do retain their value. So we definitely are. I will say that there are some IFAS researchers that are resistant to not having permanent irrigation.
Okay.
But we're engaging with those people also.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to know if they had understood the urgency that we're seeing in terms of actually addressing some of these things, and feeling like that if we could bring them on board, that they would have more clout in some of these communities that we're trying to impress upon. But if there's resistance from them too, then they may not be the best partner for us in terms of making sure that's done. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stacy.
Okay, thank you, board. I guess my brief comments would be that I would want to see these recommendations and these options go forward. We have to begin to think about water conservation and climate change policy, looking at where the science is telling us where some of the most dire situations could arise. Some of that being, of course, using too much water. And so with our population growing, we generally know, that's going to continue. And so, folks generally, we saw that was a good map that sort of illustrated that it really is an outlier number of folks who are overusing what I think a rational person would deem a reasonable person's use of water. And so because irrigation is optional, and it really seems like it's subdivision developers that are deciding to build out the homes with these irrigation systems already. So it really seems like we're going to have to take a policy, a conservative policy position to help sort of nudge folks into a conservation mindset, particularly for their lots. So, that would be my recommendation to this board, that you all consider those policy recommendations into the future. Obviously, these are policies that would have to be sort of communicated very well, so that folks know what to expect. But on the same token, there are cities, you look at the water crisis in California right now, there are cities that are taking very, very dire action to sort of keep their communities' water supply abundant. So I don't see any policy recommendations specifically for the board to consider today, but what I would like to do is I would like for the board to sort of just unanimously give our permission for these policy recommendations to come back before the board, and if there's any individual decisions that need to be made by the Board of County Commissioners or the City Commission, that we take up those policy recommendations at a later date. So without objection, can I get a motion to that effect?
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion and a second for these policy recommendations to continue down their stalwart paths and to bring them back before the boards, the respective boards. Any further comment or any comment from the public? Okay, would you like to speak?
Good morning, Nancy Darren. I'm sorry I got here late, Stacy. That was fantastic. Thank you, Commissioner Ward, for the comment about GRU bills and how people could be better educated. I think the Homeowners Association education and really encouraging them might be a very helpful thing, it sounds like. But can we take also, more and more people are concerned about pollinators and about health and stuff, and so perhaps that could be woven into educational materials that would, you can save a lot of money on your GRU bill, and you can be protecting pollinators and health. When I bought my first house here, it had an irrigation system. I'd never had one before, and I got my first GRU bill, and it had used 11,000 gallons of water. And we were in a drought back then. I shut that sucker off and unplugged it and never used it again. And when I got in my current house, I put cisterns in. And that's another thing I've wondered about, because with a 1-inch rain, I get 1,200 gallons of water, and I'm storing 3,600 gallons of water. And I have a pump, I can do all my watering with it. And so if you have a homeowners association with a common area or something, or just, I'm a homeowner, right? I've got about 3,800 gallons of water in a pump, and I'm not using rainwater. My potable water use for the whole household's about 2,000 gallons. So thinking about some of those things might be useful as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that is business discussion item E1. We will now move to the second discussion item, which is the Citizen Climate Advisory Committee appointments. So we've got 3 vacancies on the advisory committee. We've got ballots here in front of us. If we've got discussion, because we've got to appoint 1 member to a 3-year term and 2 citizens to a 1-year term. So if there's discussion, or if you'd like, I can briefly recess the meeting and we can pass our preferences to the clerk. They can tally them up, and then if there's consensus, that's the way that we have done it before on the city commission. So I think we'll probably end up doing that. Any input?
Mr. Chair, Steve Hoster, Alachua County Environmental Protection Department Director. My only suggestion was to see if there's anyone from the public who's interested in
Oh, right.
being heard. There's no one here in the audience, none of the applicants, but there might be someone online or
Okay.
on the phone.
Yeah. Is there anyone watching the meeting? Maybe you're out in the hall, but if you're an applicant, if a citizen application to the Climate Advisory Committee, now is the time when we would allow applicants to speak before the commission deliberates making those appointments. But you're right, after seeing none, I think we're just going to have to push forward here. Mayor Poe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only clarification I'd want to get from you is whether you want us to indicate who we would prefer for the 3-year term versus the 2 1-year terms. The other alternative way that, I think we've done it in the past is to whoever gets the most votes has the 3-year term, and the next, next 2 get 1 year. I don't care. I just want to know what to put on my ballot.
I would say indicate your preference for 3 and 1 year, because we may have multiple candidates with supermajorities. So that way we only have to do 1 ballot.
Done and done.
That's the theory.
Put your name on it because it's a public
Yeah,
record.
name your ballots, please. Thank you.
Okay.
And we'll just,
Do we have another copy of this? Because we do not do this way in the county, and so I made all kinds of marks on mine. I prefer to turn in a clean. Thank you.
yeah, we have new ones. We have
do roll call,
proper
so.
paper ballots. Anybody need anything else? Okay. Yeah, just take a couple minutes.
Oh, I didn't put my name on mine. Duh.
Yeah, just initial it.
Yeah, I did it in the right column. Okay.
Okay. Yes, you put, mark your name, on the columns. That would be my preference.
Okay. Should I put it in a document or?
You can just read it out.
Okay, so we have Lisa Blythe with 1 vote. We have Danielle Cucciara with 5 votes, 2 of those with a preference to her having the 3-year term. We have Peter Davis with 3 votes. I'm sorry, not Peter Davis. He didn't receive any votes. It was Nathan Fox who received 3 votes. Gennaro Guerrero Espinoza had 1 vote. Terry Harpold had 3 votes with 1 preference for the 3-year term. And Barry Jacobson had 2 votes with 1 having a preference for the 3-year term.
Okay, it looks as though we have 1 majority and then 2 other folks who've gotten a near majority. 2
Make a
with,
motion,
yep.
Yeah, I make a motion
Yes,
we
Nathan
accept
Fox.
Daniel Cucciara for the 3-year term and Mr. Fox and Mr. Harpold for the 1-year terms.
Motion and a second to appoint our members. Do we have any further comment or any public comment, or has anybody joined us late here? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you to everyone who applied. If you didn't get it this time, these vacancies, they're always available, and so keep looking. Your chance might just be around the corner. Okay, we are now moving to our next agenda item, item E3, and this is an overview of Deerhaven Renewable's fuel portfolio, fuel sourcing. Okay, and we've got GRU here with us. Thank you. How are you doing, sir?
Great. Good morning, Chair members. My name is Eric Walters, Chief Sustainability Officer for Gainesville Region Utilities. I received this request to come give a presentation. I guess there were a few questions on DHR, the fuel sourcing, how that's done, how we handle it. So just wanted to give an overview of how that happens and answer any questions that you may have. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start off with an outline. We're going to go through the 3 categories of fuel that we do receive. And I'll give you a few details on where those come from, how we mainly source them, and benefits, pros and cons of each type. We'll also go through the historic biomass fuel sourcing, how much came from each one of those sources. And then we'll talk about the minimum sustainability standards, and that's how we basically ensure the long-term longevity and health of the forest when we do that. So let's start off with the first category is mill residues, and it's mainly 3 types. You've got pine bark, you've got dry residuals, and you've got wet residuals. And this is really the byproducts of what's left over from production of other biomass materials, so either lumber or some other product that's being produced. And so this is the leftover of that. It's very high quality. It's produced in very large volumes, but there's also a lot of market for that. So there are a lot of buyers for this particular type of fuel. As a result, because it's high quality and a lot of buyers, high demand, there's also a higher price. And so it usually constitutes less of what we use for the biomass facility. So historically, about 5% of the fuel is sourced from this source. It also doesn't respond very well to a surge demand. And when we talk about surge demand, the electric generation fleet sometimes has hiccups. There can be changes that divert from the plan. And so if another generating unit is unavailable, either by plan or unexpectedly, surge capacity basically gives you the ability to call someone and say, hey, I need more of this to be delivered here. This particular fuel type doesn't lend itself very well because there's not a lot of leftover from that fuel source. We'll talk about a few more that does have that surge capacity. So the next type or source is really urban wood, and it is the most variable category. This comes from tree trimming, storm debris, yard waste, any of those things that produce a byproduct of limbs or what have you. All these are typically sent to an aggregator. They process it. It's usually ground. So if you're looking at this picture here, it's more of a fibrous, stringy material, a little harder to maintain and to handle. But it does give us the ability to at least put it into the boiler to burn that. Because it comes from so many different sources, it's very variable, right? So we can't depend on one of these things to be very consistent throughout the entire source. But all of these are within our requirements to burn for the plant. There are also a higher potential for foreign materials, plastics, metals, obviously things that don't burn or we don't want to burn in the facility. There's a higher chance for those foreign materials to be in this fuel type, and so we do pay particular attention to what it is to make sure that we're removing as much of that as possible. And the aggregator also has in their responsibility to be able to do that. So it has limited surge demand, so we can call and get a little more, but then it's dependent on what is actually in the aggregator facility and how much they have on hand. Historically, it's been between 10 to 25% of our fuel source. The largest quantity of wood comes from what we call the in-woods category. It's really the foundation of the fuel supply. The large majority of it is hardwood, but this area also leads itself to the biggest misconceptions, right? So most of that volume comes from what we call site prep. It is area being logged and being prepared for replanting. So if you look at like a pulp or paper mill that sources their material, you'll drive down the road and you'll see lines of pine planted in a straight line, right? The marketable things for pulp and paper is those pine, it's the softwood. When they go in and clear that out, what's left over is typically hardwoods or things that they can't burn or use to make paper. So what typically happens is they would cut all the hardwood out, clear it out, whatever's left over, and they would do one of two things with it. They'd either pile it up and leave it and just continue to replant, or they just open burn. They'd set it on fire and let it burn. So basically what the DHR facility has done is created a market to say, hey, don't do that. Why don't you process it, bring it to us instead of leaving it there with no value? We'll pay you for that and bring value, not only in creating electricity, but also to the ecosystem, right? And so that's where the majority of our wood source comes from. It is mostly logged, it is chipped, it has a very different consistency. The other was very stringy and connected. This is really small wood chips that flow and move very easily, very easy to burn, very easy to handle. It has the most reliable scale up or surge capacity when we need it. So when things do happen, unforeseen or unplanned, this has the ability to basically increase capacity in a very short amount of time. It's not infinite, but it's definitely quicker than the other two sources that we spoke about. It historically consists of 60 to 90% of our fuel source. So let's talk a little bit about where we have actually gotten our biomass from. And over the past 18 months, this has been where most of our wood sourcing has come from DHR. And even though it's been over the past 18 months, it's historically consistent with what we see and what we typically receive. So first is in-woods. It's about 75% of the wood that we receive has been from in-woods. From urban wood, it's been about 22%. And mill residues has been somewhere around 3%. And we get a lot of questions about, okay, so where does this wood come from? Is it local? Is it not? The sourcing was really based on a 75-mile radius around Gainesville or the facility. So that's really where the woodshed comes from, is a 75-mile circle around the plant. When you look at actual data, an overwhelming majority of that comes from within a 55-mile radius. So it's fairly close to where we are. And just as a note here, GRU does not accept developer debris. So construction, those kind of things, we don't accept that. There's a higher propensity for treated wood, which we can't burn because of our permanent emissions controls. And there's also a higher level of potential foreign material that's in that as well. So developer debris typically doesn't come, and also we don't accept biomass from individual customers. So someone can't show up with a pickup truck and say, hey, burn this. We don't do that. We typically try to point people to aggregators because they do have quality controls in place that allow them to filter it out, to process it, and bring it to us in a way that we can burn it. The facility itself doesn't have a lot of raw material handling capability. It can handle processed material, so that chopped or ground biomass can handle that very well. Anything outside of that, there's really no equipment on site to be able to handle that. All right, and lastly, let's talk about the minimum sustainability standards. And really what this was is as the biomass facility was developed, was put into place, the suppliers and the developer wanted to make sure that the wood sourcing wasn't what some people think it is just clear cutting of wood and just no regard for anything, right? The goal here was really to ensure that suppliers responsibly source biomass and they have harvesting standards that they abide by, okay? It's focused on the longevity and health of the forest, and it was developed by a group of forestry professionals, professors, and also consultants of the business that come together and say, you know, what things can we put in place to make sure that we are looking at the long-term health. To be a supplier for DHR, all of the suppliers must agree to abide by these standards. All these suppliers also must attend an annual sustainability and best practices seminar hosted by the facility, so they will come and learn the latest best practices in sustainability. And then there are also independent audits annually by a third party to verify compliance. So they will go through and look at the records. They will go through and look at the sites. They will check and verify chain of custody. They will do all of those things as a third party for the site to ensure, yes, what you're receiving meets these sustainability standards, and there are no concerns there. So I've tried to give you a brief overview of it, but the question slide is not there. So at this point, I will entertain any questions.
Thank you. We do have several questions, so we'll just go down the line, and we'll start with Commissioner Wheeler.
Thank you for that. Those are all questions I've had questions, so you've got them all. But I do have a couple follow-up. What's an aggregator?
So an aggregator is someone that basically takes in wood waste, all right, or wood from other parts of the county. They would usually charge a tipping fee. They will usually take that material in. They will either resell it to someone else or they will process it and bring it to us. So some of your local bark comes from aggregators. So it's basically a place to bring all that wood in to have it processed, either resold or brought to us.
Is that the sort of person or a supplier? What's the difference in a supplier and an aggregator? Are they the same?
An aggregator can be a supplier, yes.
Okay.
But not all aggregators are suppliers.
So they are private businesses in the community, so that if people have yard waste or big trees, a lot of us have had trees that have come down in the storms that are good lumber. So you would contact these folks, we would contact one of these suppliers or aggregators and pay them then to come take the wood away?
Correct.
And then they would sell that to you?
Correct.
Okay, that's how it works. Because I know when we first were talking about this, we were all excited about the idea of being able to contribute to the biomass by giving you our stuff.
Right.
And realizing that there's a middleman in there that we would have to pay and then pay again, or they would be making a living from that. So there are local businesses. How we find them? Are they just generally? That's
a very good question. I know there's a couple that I won't repeat on the mic, but there are a couple
okay.
around town that are pretty large in the industry. So I would recommend maybe Googling them to get their contact info for private citizens to be able to bring in.
You would Google what? Aggregator?
Probably lumber aggregator or processor.
Okay, so that is really a word that would be used out there. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, because we've had some lumber that's come down that's sitting in the streets that our waste management is too big for them. but we don't know where to go from there. So thank you very much for that answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Walters, for this. I really appreciate it. It's always good to get this information out there. Can you tell us, you probably know exactly, but just ballpark if you need to, the cost of fuel, all our fuels, just so we can get a picture of where this fits?
Sure. So we all know that there's been a lot of volatility in the fuels market lately, right? But most recently, biomass is actually our cheapest source. It's somewhere around $3.50 per MMBTU. So an MMBTU is basically a unit of measure that allows you to compare gas, oil, coal, biomass. It's a unit of energy. So you're paying that much for that same unit of energy across those different types. And it just allows us an easy way to say, yeah, this is cheaper than that one for whatever source it is. So for per MMBTU, biomass is around $3.50. Natural gas has been the most volatile. It's been most recently around $6 all the way up to 10 or 12. Coal has been consistent. It's been about $4.30. So those are the main three that we burn. And biomass has been the cheapest throughout really the last year and a half.
So, and we, about a third of the power we produce, somewhere between a quarter and a third every quarter, is consistently biomass, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. So we had a discussion a couple of months ago at the City Commission about whether or not it's possible to require developers, or anyone really, when they take down large quantities of trees, to require them to talk to an aggregator first before they just burn it in the field. We're working on that. Staff is going to come back and make a recommendation to us. I absolutely think we should do that. And it's even more timely now because we're halfway toward rezoning a large quantity of potentially forest to be potential home sites on 121. If we go ahead and do that, then in the future, there are going to be some greenfields that could contribute directly to biomass instead of being burned in the field if they're taken down. The county, I would hope, would go down that same path because there's a lot of biomass that's over the next 10 years or so going to be, it sounds like, felled on 122nd Street, Parker Road. So I hope that you all will consider that. And I know that the first response we get from most folks who work in the industries is, that's just not possible. State says we can't do it. We got to find a way to do it. Because the default for most builders is take them down, make a pile, light a match. And every time I drive by one of those, wherever it is, I just see energy going out into the atmosphere instead of powering our homes. That's more natural gas we have to purchase and burn, more fossil fuel we have to burn to turn these lights on, when we have something that is not fossil fuel just burning out in a field. So I really think that we need to get on that in a hurry, both at the city and the county, to bring in requirements that at least you ask. You know, sometimes it can't be used, but we should make a requirement that at least you've made the effort to try to get it to be burned for power. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brizzi.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you 100%. I mean, when it's being burned in the field, it's also ending up in our atmosphere in ways that are much more, like, you know, air quality wise, not great, versus the scrubbers and all of the things that you're required to have in order to be able to burn that. So I think it's healthier for our air quality as well as for our environment overall for not burning fossil fuels. Additionally, I think I would hope that the market would help drive some of that. I mean, if natural gas is so high and you need the fuel, you would think that if I was a pine plantation and I cleared my pine trees and I had a bunch of hardwood and I knew there was a market for it, I don't know why I would throw a match on it. So I'm wondering, what the deal is with the market, if it's just transportation or if there's a lack of, like, what are the industries that maybe we don't have that are between those two? Like, is it the transport, is it the distribution? You know, I'm a food person, so I think about it from a food perspective. Like, why does food get wasted in the field? And I'm guessing it's a lot of the same reasons that this stuff gets wasted in the field. But that's one question I have, but I'll give you my other one so you don't have to.
Okay.
The other is, I wondered, I wasn't actively involved in the processes that were thought when the original standards were getting set, but I would love to hear a little bit about, you talk about it being waste, and within a 55-mile radius. I know that areas are always being cleared and replanted, and so there is going to be some level of additional trees, but we also, a mature forest, especially with hardwoods growing up in it, takes several, 20 years before you're going to get any kind of reasonable stands. And so I wonder if you feel like we have enough of that around. I think this question grew out of, how do we ensure sustainability long-term of enough fuel within our region? And are you all exploring the idea of biomass crops or other things that would contribute to opportunities to protect our agricultural areas and our rural areas and provide alternative cropping systems, and also provide you all with a fuel source that was sustainable if and when sort of the waste wood is no longer around because it's growing?
So, Chair members, great questions, and I'll tackle the first one first. When we talk about impacts in the market, we have seen an uptick in the cost of biomass coming to us. Part of it is the transportation, because of the diesel that's used to transport some of these materials to the site. Then that cost obviously goes up for that. What we try to do is we do have a third party that works with us to go out into the field. They have licensed foresters, they have licensed professionals that have contacts within the community and the surrounding areas. And so they try to develop or drum up business per se, right? But at the end of the day, you have to have a company or a group that has the ability to buy the equipment, to harvest, to chip, to process, and to transport, right? So we will pay them for that once they start delivering, but of course we don't provide upfront capital and those kind of things to help develop that market. So as we go and as we develop these sources, we are trying to drum up business or drum up market per se. So that is happening, but it is limited to folks that can build up and they have either that background, that expertise, or they can start up another part of their business to help support that. So that's kind of the barrier that's there for general market. But you do see surges and changes based on overall economy, prices, so forth. And the main part of that is really transportation and also the quality of the wood. Those are the main two things that determine the price that we pay. So if it's a high quality wood and it's coming from far, well, yeah, that price is going to be higher. But if it's a low quality wood or lower quality wood and it's coming closer, well, that price would be lower, right? So there are a few market dynamics that come into play there that we try to balance when we source. So the second question, you talked about supply and waste and biomass crops, and we're doing things in all of those areas, right? So when I say waste, I mean I'm thinking particularly in a pulp and paper facility where it's only softwood that they want. They consider hardwood waste, right? So that's a prime opportunity for us to like, hey, come bring that waste to us instead of clearing it and burning it. So that is one definition of waste. And also some landowners are required to do forestry management, and they're required to clear out underbrush, and they're required to clear out, smaller trees or whatever for the overall health. We consider that waste as well. And all of that material we typically try to bring into the biomass facility to burn. We are exploring other crops, biomass, to be able to supplement and increase our supply. it's all renewable, but you can harvest them and then clear the land and then replant. And over a period of time, whether it's a year, 6 months, 8 months, you'll be able to replenish and harvest again. So there are some things that are out there that we are researching. We're working on working up to a trial for one particular type of grass. It's called elephant grass that simply just grows tall, and there's a lot of BTU content into it. And so we're looking at, well, how can we make that work? Is there a supplier out there willing to grow it? Can we harvest it? Can we store it for a little while? How does it store? When we receive wood chips, it goes outside on the ground in a pile, and we harvest it as we need it. And so it is typically a quick turnaround, but if I set it outside for a day and it rains, does the BTU content now go down? Does it become mush so that I can't burn it? All those things have to be factored in. So we are looking at how do we develop more crops, and we're working with a few local folks to do that. But again, that's still in the development/research stages.
Well, I guess I would just, on that front, I guess I would just say that I think there's a lot of, I think, energy and interest from our commission in protecting the rural areas of our county. And as we do that, one of the questions we had is, how much land does it take to support the biomass plant? And how, and if all the forests that were providing you that waste were in growth stage and not in processing stage, how much land would it take to be able to produce that biomass crop for you? Like, those are the kinds of questions that are interesting to us as we start to think about, we need to find alternative markets for our farmers as well, because most of our small and mid-sized farmers, are being priced out of the markets. It's very challenging to get in markets. There's a lot of infrastructure we need to build to be able to provide them access to markets. And so as we look at prioritizing different cropping systems, prioritizing investment in infrastructure, it would be good to know where biomass fits into our local needs and our local equation. So I'll just throw that out there, something that I'm very interested in and would love to hear more about as you all do that research and learn more.
No, that's a very good point. No, I will take that note to bring something back and at least get some more research. And as you were talking, I realized I failed to answer one of your questions. On the initial study for the development of the biomass, they did a 30-year outlook in that 75-mile radius. And when I say they, it was a group of, again, professionals, foresters, consultants came together and said, do we have enough biomass for those particular reasons? Some you're going to remove and harvest and then replant and grow. Can you support this facility within that 75-mile radius? The study came back saying, yes, you can actually support that for the next 30 years within that 75 miles. And so I would have to dig up that original report. I don't have the specifics on hand, but that was part of the requirement for financing for going forward with the plan originally.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real briefly, I would note that, so they did a report when it was built for a 30-year period. We don't have 30 years left on it, so it doesn't need to work for the next 30. And my guess is that 20 years from now, when another commission is looking at our next sources of energy, that we don't burn things anymore. That's the hope. I mean, frankly, that's what we have to assume is going to be the case, because we have bigger problems if we're still burning stuff in 25 years. So there you go. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Always good to get into the granular details. So thank you for bringing that. I don't see any further lights. Is there any members from the public who'd like to speak on the item?
Hi, Nancy Darren. Is the overhead available?
It is.
Can I do that?
Works like normal.
Whoops.
Just like
Trying. So I'm so glad you had the presentation and clear up misconceptions. I remember the initial study did say that you could support up to 120 megawatts of biomass plant for that 30-year period within the 75-mile radius. And with our strict standards, it's limited us. As we've noted, I look at all the trees. I'm in a post-mature laurel water oak neighborhood, and they're coming down all the time. So I've wondered, as GRU needs to diversify revenues, is there opportunity, like Commissioner Prizzian pointed out, to fill in those missing gaps? Can GRU become an aggregator and do some of that, a portion of that on site, which would help with transportation costs and perhaps bring in a new revenue stream that would decrease air pollution and just burning? I know the Water Management District also, when they're doing certain restoration or land clearing, that they supply as well as part of their management plans. But so having biomass as a base component, because it is a bridge to the future and it keeps us from using so much natural gas, which is taking us off a cliff really, really, really fast. And it's current carbon, it's not fossil carbon, so that's really important. And people don't think about the diversity that GRU has and how valuable having this plant has been. And when Hurricane Irma went through, we ran the biomass plant for 5 months on FEMA debris that other places were open air burning or landfilling. And during the Texas freeze, we not only supplied ourselves because we had coal, biomass, and solar, we were able to help Florida Power and Light and other utilities that are all natural gas, essentially. So we actually made money by having this diversity of fuels and local, keeping that transportation and supply chain issue down. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and seeing no other further comments, again, thank you. I will just sort of share anecdotally, many years ago when we were first discussing the future of Deerhaven Renewables, one of the someone who works for one of these companies came up to me and sort of joked, saying, "Well, if you need more, we got it. So just let us know." Of course, which I told him I don't make those calls, at least on the granular side. So the folks who are providing this in-wood fuel, their their business model essentially is built on making sure the land is reusable, making sure that they can continue to provide this fuel source, and the only way to do that is to take care of their land to make sure they can continue to replenish it. So really grateful for all the partners that have been able to make Deerhaven Renewable a complete success. And really, it has taken 5 years since I joined the commission to get to the point where we are now, where it is our cheapest source. Now, of course, some of that has to do with the market, so we'll keep eyes on that. Okay, let's move to our last agenda item, E4. We have the Alachua County Critical Infrastructure and Land Use Climate Vulnerability Analysis Update.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Shane Williams with the Alachua County Environmental Protection Department. With me today is Justin Gregory from Jones Edmonds, who will give a presentation on the status of the vulnerability analysis. In the July meeting, Justin presented the results of the first task, which is the qualitative effects of climate change on the county and the municipalities. Since then, a lot of work has been done on the quantitative impacts of climate change, which is tasks 2 and 3. So this is what the presentation is going to focus on this morning. We do have, in some areas, we do have some results to show you, but I do want to caution that they're preliminary, so this is still very much a work in progress. And we will be returning in the first half of next year with the final results. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin.
Thank you, Thanks, as Shane said, Justin Gregory with Jones Edmonds and Associates, and I'm excited to just share what the progress we've made on the project since the last time I presented. So as Shane has said, project is split up into 3 tasks. The first task is we looked at a quantitative type, or qualitative, I should say, type of analysis, and we also included a stakeholder engagement in that. That second task, we are looking at the location of critical infrastructure vulnerable to flooding. So that's something that is ongoing. And then task 3, we're doing an assessment of neighborhoods and cultural impacts to vulnerability to climate change. So that is task 3. So as we're wrapping up task 1, the stakeholder engagement, we just wrapped that up and have got the final responses, and the team is working on analyzing that. So we got just over 600 responses. Our target was 400, so we met the statistical goal we had. And I say that the results are currently being analyzed, and we'll be sharing that with you sometime soon, hopefully. On task 2, the location of critical infrastructure. So we've been working on that, trying to gather a lot of information on critical infrastructure. The city has been updating us on, they are working in parallel on their critical infrastructure data set. So we are working, taking that data and then been pulling, using similar sources, a lot of public records, to identify critical infrastructure throughout the county. And then county staff is in the process of communicating with a lot of the incorporated communities across the county to see if there's any data we've missed. So we've kind of pulled as many public sources of data as we can, and we are working on, and they can be reaching out to those communities soon, just to see if there's any additional data that needs to be added to support our analysis of flood risk and vulnerability. So on the flood risk side, we've taken, over the last few months, we've been reviewing a lot of the existing studies that are out there. The FEMA mapping across the county is fairly limited, so there aren't a lot of high accurate recent FEMA studies across the county. So looking at kind of sources of flood studies that could help supplement that. And one of the, what we did find is that the Suwannee River Water Management District and FEMA are working on a FEMA study for the Santa Fe River and the Santa Fe Basin. So they're doing 2 studies in parallel. One is an enhanced levels study for the Santa Fe River that will be developing regulatory flood maps. And then they're also doing a base level study which covers the entire Santa Fe Basin, looking at, that'll be a non-regulatory product. So the modeling approaches that they're using actually similar to what we're going to be doing countywide. So they were kind enough to share their preliminary results with us so we could get an idea of what their floodplains would look like and just have an understanding of how they are approaching that. And that study is still in process. So we've also been looking at rainfall data. I know last time I presented on some of the statewide projections, so we've narrowed those down for the county. And what we can see is some of those changes in rainfall depth. So for the 100-year one-day storm, about a 35% increase in the depth of that rainfall. And for the 10-day storm, about a 21% increase. And then looking at, and that's in 2040, and then going out to 2070, looking at a 47% increase, almost a 50% increase in rainfall depth for that 100-year one day, and then a 38% increase in the 10-day storm. So pretty significant changes in depth and frequency for expected design storms, or expected extreme rainfall. And then we'll also be analyzing the 500-year storms as well as part of that, and that's part of the state requirements for vulnerability assessments. So for task 3, we've been excited to work with the BEBR at the University of Florida, and this is the first time that this has been done in the state where we're actually starting to look at the effects of climate migration, so predominantly sea level rise, on how population projections are going to change. So this figure is showing those projections, looking at population projections both as they are today, and then if we consider sea level rise, what that delta would be. And that is based on some fairly recent research looking at how population dynamics have responded to sea level rise. And they have recently, and this is some of the preliminary data we have as of a few weeks ago, they had wrapped up that they've been doing their parcel level modeling, so very high resolution modeling of population growth within the county, and taking into account, doing it based on the existing projections and then taking into account climate migration. So you can see this is a figure showing the 2021 population density across the county. And if I switch to the next one, you should see 2100. So starting to see how that population density is going to change, is likely to change when we consider climate migration. And they've given us a lot of data that we are still processing. What's interesting, we can highlight some of the projected areas of growth. So the white is showing areas that are populated currently in 2021, and then the red is showing where we expect growth between 2021 and 2040. Blue is showing areas of growth between 2040 and 2070, and the green is showing projected growth 2070 to 2100. So that they are running a very detailed model, and this is the first time this has been done in the state as well, where we actually are looking at detailed projections of likely population changes. And so we've just got this data, so we are still processing it and trying to better understand it and incorporate it into the rest of the study. So another fundamental task for part of task 3 has been selecting a climate change scenario. There's a lot of climate change data out there, a lot of scenarios. So we've settled on the what's called the coupled model intercomparison project, and that is CMIP. And so CMIP it's the global consensus on scientists around the world have settled on certain scenarios that will be represented and using very similar. The basis for all these studies is very similar and assume similar assumptions. So CMIP 6 was published last year, and the final report should be coming out later this year. The data was published at the end of last year, and the final report will be coming out soon. So we are using CMIP 6 data, which is the most recent, most defensible. There are multiple climate change scenarios within that, so looking at different ways that society is going to respond going forward. So ranging all the way from SSP1, which is a high level of mitigation and adaptation to address climate change, all the way up to SSP5, which is very low mitigation, very little adaptation, and then also assuming it's often called the kind of business as normal. So we just keep going as we are without considering climate change. So we've settled on using that, so that gives us about a 5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature by 2100. And we've settled on using that as a planning for a number of reasons. One, it gives us a good range, upper limits on where we expect the climate to be by 2100. It's almost a worst case scenario for planning, just to know how bad could it get. And second, it shows us trends. So if you are these models, there is some uncertainty in these models, and when you look at those projections of climate change, we're more likely to see a trend in these slightly more extreme scenarios. So we've chosen to use that for planning purposes, just to see that upper bound on how bad things could get. We're going through and looking at a number of the threats based on that data. So this figure is showing the average temperature for Alachua County, how that's expected to change under that SSP5 scenario. That's the average daily minimum and the average daily maximum temperature. You can see how that changes going up to 2100. This has changed in the annual minimum temperature as well, so how that is changing. This is very initial data. And the change in annual maximum temperatures and how that is also increasing. For rainfall, we're seeing a lot of, as we have today, a lot of variability in annual rainfall, so that trend continues, but no real clear trends in the rainfall data. It's kind of looking fairly similar to what you would see today, a lot of variability in that as far as the rainfall projections. What we are seeing a clear trend in is evapotranspiration. So we're seeing that if you look at the last 20 years, we can see a trend in increasing evapotranspiration, and that trend continues. So we can going all the way out to 2100, a pretty significant increase in evapotranspiration. And unfortunately, that does start to affect drought as well, which we'll get into now. So you'll see if we look at it as an index, the annual maximum number of consecutive days without rainfall, just as an approximate indicator of drought, we can see that increases going from about 18 on average under the baseline all the way up to more than 21 days. So pretty substantial increase in the maximum number of days without rainfall in any year, and a lot of variability in that as well. And then a frequently used drought index is the Keach-Bryant drought index. You can see for that, it's calculating looking at both rainfall and evaporation and storage of moisture in the soil profile. And for that, generally a severe drought is considered anything above 600. So we can see currently we have the baseline, we're occasionally getting severe droughts, but on an average year, it's below that index. And then moving forward, you can see that increasing pretty significantly. So that gives you enhanced fire risk and a more severe drought condition to deal with. We took a University of Florida, a model that they have looking at urban irrigation demand for St. Augustine grass in this case, and we ran that under those future climate change scenarios. And I think this relates obviously to the earlier presentation. We can see how that is increasing. So this is the irrigation demand that St. Augustine grass would have moving forward. And you can see how that increases fairly significantly, and up until 2100, just a continuing trend. So next steps, we were very excited, 9 days ago almost. The USGS published the county-wide LiDAR for Alachua County. So it's almost like Christmas for us when we get those new data sets. So we have downloaded that, analyzed, and are starting to analyze it to run accuracy checks on it so we can prepare for the county-wide flood modeling. Unfortunately, it's more than a year late, which has slowed our progress on that. But we are excited to have it now. We're working on that and getting the modeling set up. We're also working on task 3. So we're continuing to analyze the extreme temperature data and look at those impacts and vulnerability to that. We are looking at crop production modeling. So I had a call with our modeler last week, and he has just finished up his results, and we'll be presenting those pretty soon. So that's looking at how crop production will be impacted by climate change moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, the flooding, we're going to be looking at that at the neighborhood scale as well. We are currently rerunning some regional groundwater models, taking into account the effects of changes in rainfall and evaporation on that regional groundwater, looking at water supply and projected increases in demand, and then fire risk as well. So looking at the effects of the projected changes in population and climate change and those drought indices, which are a good indicator of fire risk. Okay, and that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the thorough presentation. We'll take questions. Right now, we've got a commissioner comment from Mary Helen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to use all this to actually ward off some of this stuff, as you all present the information. But my question is, are you all considering saltwater intrusion too, as we have drought conditions and our water levels get lower, and we have ocean rise, infiltrating into our water systems? Is that a consideration too when you're talking about groundwater?
In the models we are running, that is not something that will be considered. I know definitely on the coastal communities in Florida, that's something we're looking at all the time, but not in the groundwater model that we'll be using.
The reason I'm asking is that there was a drought period maybe 4 or 5 years ago where we did have saltwater intrusion that came in towards Hastings, and an onion crop was totally destroyed because the water that was being pumped out was salt. And I just didn't know if that was something that you all would be thinking about as, because as the power of the springs is not able to push those rivers out any more than we're going to be seeing more coming in. And I just would hope that you all would put that in there too, because it has happened.
Yes, and we can look at that as something we've looked at in the past.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Prezia.
Thank you for this. It's exciting. I'm glad to hear you're getting some of the newer data too, so that you can have the latest and greatest. I'm excited to see those FEMA flood map, the new FEMA Santa Fe Basin stuff in there. Question, I guess, this is sort of a question for previous presentations and this presentation and sort of how they tie together. I was just wondering if our staff, Mr. Chair, have looked at some of the data that's coming out of this as they're developing that code data, because it hits to my point about plant palette again. Sort of the irrigation needs of certain plants and certain plants' ability to withstand drought versus not withstand drought. We know things like St. Augustine grass are not a very drought tolerant plant. There are others that are, and so just, I'm wondering, sort of as we move into sort of code changes, knowing how long they take and how much stakeholder engagement they require, that we make sure that this information and data is a part of that conversation. So it's more of a question for staff / comment than it is a question for you, but I'm excited to see the final. And this, you're sort of in what phase, like where are we in terms of the final? Is it sort of the spring or the winter? When will we be seeing more of the final report on the vulnerability analysis?
It would be in the spring.
Spring.
Yes,
Okay,
we still have a fair amount of analysis to do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments from the board, do we have any comments from the staff or the public? This particular item. Seeing none, I just want to thank you. You know, it is a most somber reminder of the situation that we are in, not just as a species, but here in Alachua County, we're going to be one of the central locations, not just for relocation, but if you look at the storms over the past 5 years, the whole state is really in a dire situation where we have to begin planning mitigation immediately and adaptation. So it's important that we continue to have these conversations. The future of our county is going to depend on elected officials' ability, well, first of all, our interest in commissioning these studies. Second of all, integrating the recommendations and implementing them. Because unfortunately what we've seen with most predictive climate data is that so far the worst predictions have all happened faster than we assumed. So whenever I look at data like this, looking into the next century, I think to myself, well, what's an accelerated timetable for that? Because we've already had all of our timetables moved up. So it's going to be a challenge for the next generation. But it's important for us to continue to create space for conversations like this and policy like this now, because as with generally most public policy crises for democratic government, it really only gets the attention when it hits the fan. So we are just now hitting that point here in Florida. So hopefully we can continue to prioritize this, and I would certainly hope that this board will continue to prioritize that. So I don't see any need for us taking action. I want to thank our guests. Thank you very much. We will go ahead and move forward. Is there any member comment from members of the board? Great. Thank you very much. Our next meeting date is going to be December the 12th, 9:30 a.m. here, and then we will be prepared to turn over to the next set of commissioners, which I assume the City Commission and the County Commission will have their appointment procedures in January, and you all can decide who you'd like to serve with, and then you'll select a chair at that time. So, yeah. Any other thoughts, comments?
I mean, my only comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
service. And my only comment would be that we do get an update on that, the minimum flows and levels conversations and the Springs Forum dialogues and the conversations you're having with stakeholders.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we stand adjourned.